All right, I think we are live on the internets. Yeah, and let me make sure you can
Are
see my
we? Is
screen.
this happening?
This is happening.
Ah.
Hey. All right, so hello, folks. Very good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be. Thank you for joining us here for this webinar. This is the future of .NET, and we have a lot of things to kind of talk about, a lot of things to cover. We are excited, and we are thankful for you being here. So let's start with some introductions with our first speaker, who's Jeff Fritz from Microsoft, and he is fashionably late. He was streaming earlier. Maybe he's grabbing a cup of coffee. Maybe he'll show up fashionably late. But I mean, he was here for kind of expert commentary anyways. We have a lot of things to talk through that Jeff was going to sprinkle in his expertise. So we'll see when he shows up. But the rest of us are here. So I'll start with myself. I am Sam Basu, developer advocate out of Pennsylvania, working at Progress Software. And Ed and Alyssa.
I'm Ed Charbonneau, a principal developer advocate here at Progress Software. I've been mainly focused on Blazor for the last few years here, but I'm expert in all things ASP.NET Core as well. And how about you, Alyssa?
Yeah, I am Alyssa Nykel. I'm an Angular developer advocate here at Progress, but I've recently started a show that I'll talk about during my section called JavaScript Girl in a .NET World, and I'll be covering some of the C# newness, so I'm really excited.
Yeah, and Alyssa is extremely brave to kind of step into the walled garden that sometimes .NET can feel like, especially with older folks like Ed and me kind of guarding the gates. But everybody should feel welcome.
It's been really neat, honestly. I felt very welcome, and everyone seems to have a .NET past. You know, whether you're new to .NET or you've now moved on and you're doing. I know a ton of Angular people, and they're like, yeah, I used to do nothing but .NET. And I'm like, why? Everyone. So that's the thing.
Yeah, we'll talk about some of the JavaScript stuff as well and how it kind of blends in with modern .NET. So let's get started. First thing, just a couple of housekeeping things. If you're watching this live, great to have you here. If you have to, your connection drops, if you have to run for a meeting, that's totally cool. We are recording this in high def and we'll put it out on YouTube. And also, this is your time. You're giving us like 2 hours of your precious day, so make it count. Ask away questions, right? And so there is a Q&A panel on the webinar, so you can ask away questions. We can try to answer them either by typing in or whatever time we get, we'll try to answer them live. And then if you want to leave like a breadcrumb trail for us to kind of get back to you even after the webinar, it's #HeyTelerik. Oh, and by the way, like these are our social handles, really just about anywhere. So feel free to ping us anytime and talk about .NET. So let's get into the big stuff, all the news. So last week, if you are a .NET developer in any capacity, have been in the past, or still are in the present, last week was big because we had some very big announcements and big things going on. We started off Monday with the big Visual Studio 2022 launch. This is our IDE for all things .NET, preferred IDE. Some of us are on Macs and we use other things, and that's totally fine. And then for the next 3 days, we had this small thing called .NET Conf happen, which was a lot of stuff, right? The first 2 days were pretty much 8 to 5, all of the Microsoft folks announcing all the big things and big keynotes. And then we switched to like a 24-hour stream where we invited some Microsoft folks and then a lot of community folks, like speakers from all around the world who came to kind of share their passion and their expertise with .NET. It was a lot of fun, a lot of information that was put out. So it was almost like too much. So I'm still absorbing some of it, and I'm sure many of you are in the same boat. So we just want to kind of provide maybe a developer perspective of how we feel about all of these things that are happening. So Ed and Alyssa, feel free to jump in wherever you want. But to me, .NET 6 it's a big deal because it has taken them, Microsoft, a few years to come up with this unified story. We saw these like similar slides with like .NET 5, but the common base libraries, the core of what makes up .NET, it wasn't entirely unified. We did the Blazor thing first, but with .NET 6, we are bringing in Mono, we are bringing in the mobile development, we are bringing in IoT. It is really all one framework now. And there's something nice about it because the tools become not so dependent on the frameworks and the things that are powering it. And really, we can build for anything. You're more than welcome on Mac, Windows, or Linux. So it's a good place to be. Ed, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, you can develop pretty much anything, any platform these days, or any ecosystem with .NET. So especially with Blazor and Blazor Hybrid and the web and things, we'll talk about a little bit of that too. But the fact that you can take your .NET skills and do just cherry pick here, machine learning and web development, create a PWA, run that on an Oculus. I mean, you can deploy things pretty much anywhere with .NET. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm trying to pull together kind of the highlights, and there was a lot of stuff that was announced. But to me, as a .NET developer, like doing this day in and day out, like these were some of the major highlights in terms of what was announced at .NET Conf and at Visual Studio 2022 launch. So in terms of the technology stack, we had a lot of things. .NET 6 is out, and it was launched last Tuesday. And the big news here is it carries the LTS badge, which is the long-term support badge, which essentially means you have 3 to 4 years of guaranteed support. Now, that doesn't mean it ends after 3 to 4 years. It's like a 10-year thing, but then you don't have to, if you don't feel like, you don't have to update for another 3 years. And a lot of enterprises kind of want that LTS badge. The last one was .NET 3, and I think 3.1 maybe. So it kind of gives them that stability, that comfort that they're looking for, that they are migrating to something that is very stable, will be for years to come. We had a lot of good things coming out for a variety of platforms. We have minimal APIs. We have Blazor updates, both on server side as well as on WebAssembly. We have Entity Framework Core 6 come out. We have .NET MAUI, still in preview, but a lot of the bits were announced, and they're baked into .NET now. We have hybrid apps with Blazor MAUI. We have upgrade assistance. We have a lot of Azure support. So that's just just on the technology stack, and I'm cherry picking on some of the bigger news. But in terms of your tooling and your language updates, again, you are sitting on the latest bits here with Visual Studio 2022 and languages. Like, you can have the best frameworks in the world, but if your programming language makes you struggle, that's not a good experience, right? So thankfully, C# is here with C# 10. And for those of you who like doing functional and like doing F#, F# 6 is out, and hot reload is there everywhere. So Alyssa, Ed, am I missing anything big here?
I just wanted to clarify, because as I was looking through what's new with C# 10, it's not the LTS version, but it goes on like an every other. And you said that the last LTS for .NET was 3, so it's not mirrored the same way. I just assumed they were like both, like every other is LTS. So that's not how they, I guess, .NET versions work.
Well, so C# is just a language. I don't think C# carries any like LTS badges. It's the .NET runtime.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so Ed, correct me. Which was the last .NET LTS version? Was it 5? No, 5 was not for sure. It was the one before, 3.1.
It was 3, and we skipped 4.
Yeah,
because numbers are hard. We skipped 4 because they didn't want to confuse the full framework. .NET full framework, the older .NET version, with .NET Core. So they synced up on 5. So we removed the core part of the naming and went and skipped 5, 4 and went to 5. And 5 is the non-LTS version. 6 is LTS.
Yeah, numbers are hard.
And
but,
I just wanted to say we have a lot of questions about, regarding MAUI, and also some Blazor questions coming in. So I want to say we have those sections, and we will most definitely give you some clarification.
Absolutely.
We have a face coming to the stream here. I think Jeff is ready. So we can bring Jeff on.
Is he on? Where is his camera? Bring Jeff on. And then Alyssa, you're not entirely wrong to say like every other .NET carries the LTS patch. Sometimes it's like a couple of previews here and there. Oh, there's Jeff. There's Mr. Fritz, fashionably late. How are you, sir?
Sorry about that. How you doing, friends?
We're good. We are good. We are sharing. We're sharing a lot of the excitement that happened last week, with Visual Studio 2022, .NET 6 launches. So actually, Jeff, you came in at just the right spot here with all the things that were announced, right? So first up, what does .NET 6 mean to you?
So .NET 6 is that next evolution of where we started this journey with .NET Core 5-6 years ago now. And it feels weird to say .NET Core is 5-6 years old now. But .NET Core, we took the core name off of it because we wanted to signal our intent that, I'm going to sound like the Highlander here for a second, there can be only one .NET, right? And with .NET 5, we started bringing all the things together. Windows desktop development, ASP.NET Core development was already in .NET Core. So with .NET 6, we're even closer to having .NET MAUI in the box, mobile development, multi-platform development, Windows development, ASP.NET web development, everything in one box, one set of tooling, one install to get you productive to build wherever you want to go. .NET 6 means I need one install for one set of great tools, and I'm going to have the fastest frameworks available on the planet. That's a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, and it's that unification story that has taken some time to come to this spot. So there were a lot of very cool things announced, Jeff, but what are some of your favorites? Like, I'm putting out a list of some of the things that are most relevant to .NET developers, but what was your favorite thing?
Honestly, I'm a nut for Blazor. I love all the Blazor things. I've been doing Blazor for 2-3 years now, and I really like that. But I'm a big fan of what's happening with minimal APIs. This was a syntax that's been available to us since ASP.NET Core 1, being able to map get, map set. But it was syntax that was embedded in a file off to the side, and it was easy to overlook when you had such really cool features available to you, like standard API controllers that were made. So to raise that up and even enhance the C# programming language to make it easier to write those very, and Alyssa, please tell me if this is out of line here, those very node-friendly syntax, that a top-level statement that just says, when I map a get from this location, go execute this method, or here's a function to go and execute. When I look at how you do that in Node and how you do that in C# with ASP.NET Core, it's very comfortable. It's a very similar syntax. And I think the key thing that developers like about Node that they can now do in C# with .NET 6 is get right to your business logic. All that ceremony just kind of fades away. If you need to see it, the generated code is still there, but all the ceremony fades away. And honestly, I'm a big fan of the minimal APIs, and I'm looking forward to seeing how folks take advantage of that to build microservices faster, easier, because of what the language and the framework brings.
Absolutely. All right, so let's kind of get into the meat of stuff here, just so all know how we're going to do this. I'm going to start things off with .NET MAUI. Jeff, that's the thing that I am excited most about. And I will show some minimal APIs, and we're going to dovetail nicely into the hybrid apps with Blazor and .NET MAUI. Then Ed comes in with all the Blazor goodness, and Alyssa has been very brave to kind of learn C#. For those of us doing this C# for years and years, we don't know stuff. There are details that we always miss. So Alyssa has been doing a really good job kind of ramping up on C#, so she's going to show you some of the C# 10 stuff. Okay, but before we begin,
heads up, Sam,
go ahead.
Our question answer is full of MAUI stuff already, so you've got your work cut out for you. So there's lots of good questions coming through.
You do.
Let's do it. Before we start though, hey, .NET 6 is here. All the developer tools are here. We are all about developer productivity. But if you are using any of our stuff, Telerik, all the things for all the .NET developers, desktop, web, mobile, whatever you might be doing. We put out a post that says we are completely ready, right? So if you want to run .NET 6 and whatever web or desktop framework you're doing, our tools will work. If you want to write stuff in Visual Studio 2022, which you can see all of us use that today, we are ready. So there's nothing stopping you. All of our UI works. If that's what you're looking for in terms of developer productivity to kind of ship your apps faster, we are absolutely good from the Telerik side. Okay, so before we start, since we asked Jeff this question, a poll for all of you.
Oh,
look at that! It's nicely split. Well, sure. I mean, like Jeff said, it's hard to deny the importance of .NET 6 and that unification. It's hard to deny that Visual Studio is what we spend our entire days in. So the tooling and the runtime are obviously the most important things. But then you kind of have a nice split. A lot of folks are excited about C# and minimal APIs. Hybrid is interesting. .NET MAUI, it's not quite there yet, production ready. It's coming early next year. But the promise is there. Much of the bits are actually baked into .NET as we speak. Okay, so let's get into it. Let's switch back to our slides here, and let's talk about MAUI, right? And minimal APIs, and then it's going to be a nice transition into Blazor. So I'm getting a few of these slides from the Microsoft folks here, but the MAUI promises here. It is cross-platform UI. It's an evolution of Xamarin Forms, and for the first time, we have an ability to reach mobile and desktop from the single code base. If you look at iOS, Android, all things Windows, all things Mac, that's like, I saw a graphic, that's like 98% of the places where you run apps, right? So you have a large audience to reach. And it is really single project, and everything is going to be nice. The tooling is what is catching up. A lot of the bits are still already in place. So I am excited about MAUI, as most .NET developers should be. And I mean,
Sasha just asked how to convert a WPF to MAUI. So if you're just going to demo that real quick, I feel like that would be beneficial to all. Yeah.
There is a magic wand. It costs a little bit of money, but no, while there might not be a magic wand, there is a lot of guidance. This is real, and this is a question everybody's asking. I have WinForms apps. I have WPF apps. What do I do with it? What does it look like for us going forward? So let us kind of go over some of the bits that have shipped and what it means. I promise you towards the end, we'll have like 20 to 25 minutes where we just talk about migration and modernization. And this is one of the things we get with .NET 6. With it carrying the LTS badge, a lot of folks are thinking about it. So let's talk about your options, right? There is no right way. It's all about what else are you doing, what else is on your code base, what's your expertise level, and you have options everywhere. And this is the other thing that Ed has mentioned, hybrid apps, right? So nobody's forcing you into this, but if you like what Blazor is doing for you on the web, there are ways to bring that goodness into desktop apps, right? So this is pretty exciting, and mobile apps, right? And this is kind of riding on top of .NET MAUI, bootstrapping your apps.
We'll get into some details on this, Sam, but just to answer a few questions, common questions in chat here. People are asking about what there's some confusion, I guess, between MAUI and Blazor Hybrid and what those two things are. So not every MAUI app is a Blazor Hybrid app, but you could say that all Blazor Hybrid apps are essentially MAUI apps.
MAUI apps.
So what .NET MAUI is doing,
WinUI 3 there as well, but for most of the cases it's MAUI.
So .NET MAUI, okay, is giving you the bootstrapping, so you can have a runtime and you can have a UI stack that knows how to render native UI on iOS, Android for mobile, and then we reach Windows with WinUI, and we reach Mac with MacCatalyst. So if you just want to do .NET desktop technologies, .NET MAUI is a great way to reach desktop. But if you are already doing Blazor, or if you have other parts of your teams doing Blazor web apps, then you can bring that web goodness, your routing, your components into a desktop application. It is just bootstrapped with .NET MAUI.
So and one more question. Sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
So there is also a Blazor WebView component for WinForms and WPF if you'd like to build and target those frameworks. So developers out there that are you've already got a nice size commitment into those structured architectures of applications, that's okay. You can take advantage of some of what Sam and Ed and Alyssa are going to show you here by using that component, and then you can hand off to those same Blazor capabilities in those existing applications.
Yeah, and one thing that's not listed here is Linux. We have a question about Linux. So Linux support is not part of this as of yet.
For .NET MAUI, and again, like even for Microsoft, like you have to focus on engineering where most people are, and there is already like a community-driven effort to reach Linux. But no, right now out of the gate, it is these 4 major things. And Jeff actually made a good point. Let's watch our time here. I would like to show you as many things. So if you have an older WinForms or WPF app, you don't need to rewrite that whole thing in .NET MAUI. So to Jeff's point, you can embed that web view inside of your WPF or your WinForms app and go run with Blazor, right? So let's get to our stuff. And hopefully the things we talked through are going to answer some of the question. Minimal APIs, we talked about this. It is lowering the barrier to entry. You don't have to do this. You can do the older way of doing APIs. This is just so much nicer, especially with C#10 and the language improvements. Really, you can just start up a new app and write hello world console write line. Or if you're trying to expose an API, 3 lines of code. 3 lines, that's all it takes. And then you can kind of start building up on top of it. So a lot of cool things happening. Let's look at some demos, right? Okay, so first thing is, if you are kind of starting out with .NET 6, this is our man, Richard Lander. The whole .NET team is behind him, but he wrote up an epic long post on all the goodness that's in .NET 6. And then you should take the time to read through this. A big thing to take home is performance. A lot of performance benefits with the way .NET 6 runs. So go get .NET 6 if you haven't already, be it on Windows or Mac or anywhere else. Go download the bits for .NET 6. So I'm going to start a little bit on the Mac side, and then we can transition to Windows. So let me first bring up my terminal here. And let's bump up the fonts. So first thing is, if I do a .NET list my SDKs, you're going to see these are all my .NETs, and it's just so nice. It's just one folder. I can blow away .NET, I can get it back, I can ship it with my .NET, my applications. So my .NET runtimes go all the way back to 3, and then you can see the 6 previews all the way until RTM, and then this is the final 6 bit. So that's my .NET runtime. Now, the next thing I want to do is, if I do a .NET new, and if I start listing them out, you're going to see all of the templates that I have. These are the same templates that you're going to get from Visual Studio. It's all command line first. Visual Studio is using some of these templates. So here you have your iOS applications or your Android applications. What was Xamarin in iOS, Xamarin in Android? It's now .NET for iOS and Android. Nothing has changed. It's all baked in now. And you have your WPF and your other things as well. I have a whole bunch of .NET MAUI templates here, which you may or may not see all of them. But again, if you live on the preview bits, you can see all of them. And then there is Blazor and all of that goodness. So let's kind of start with MAUI first, right? So what is the MAUI promise? First thing is, if you are doing MAUI, don't be like me. I'm kind of the odd one out doing MAUI on a Mac. And you absolutely can. The best experience is on Visual Studio 2022. So David Ortno from the MAUI team wrote up this post. And essentially, if you're doing .NET MAUI, get on Visual Studio 2022, and you want to get one past the main release. With 17.0 is the production-ready, stable release. 17.1 shipped as well. That's the next preview. And in there is this little checkbox that says, once you say, give me mobile development bits, make sure that checkbox is on. That's going to give you all the templates, right? And then you should be good to go. No more need for doing MAUI check or command line. You still can, like I am on a Mac, but all of the bits are ready. A lot of the controls are now handlers in the MAUI world. So this is very, very good. So if I can start with the MAUI app here. So let me take you to a place where I keep all my projects. And I'm going to clear this out. Here are all my projects. Let me start with the MAUI app, right? So let's go to MAUI Hello. And a couple of things to point out here. So first thing is, I'm going to do a code, not one, code dot, because I have VS Code on my environment path, so I can bring it up. And while it's coming up, I'm going to copy one line of code here. Let's run this on a MacCatalyst, because this is a command line tool. So I'm just going to fire this up and say, go run this on a MacCatalyst. So this is a .NET MAUI app running on a Mac. I can run the same app on iOS. I can run the same app on Android or Windows. So we're going to give it a second. The app is almost ready. There you go. So now we have a native Mac desktop application with MAUI. It's just the default template. It's got a counter and everything works. But what is
I'm a little confused because you said that MAUI wasn't officially released, but you're using it. What's happening with the world?
It's in preview. So the reason why it's not officially released is it depends on a lot of different things, and a lot of teams across Microsoft have to come together. Not to mention we depend on iOS and Apple bits and Android bits and Visual Studio integration. So the tooling is what is coming up. So this is still in preview. It's hitting GA, general availability, sometime early next year. Now, what is to note here?
You can use it, you just shouldn't use it in production, essentially? Or
Yes,
you can kind of use it? Okay.
You can kind of use it, stay on the bleeding edge, but you're not recommended that you do. But it's all there. The bits are there for you to play around and start considering your migrations. Now, what is to note here is if I look at my CS project, it's all simple, target framework .NET 6, and just one line of code here, use MAUI that brings in those namespaces that MAUI needs. Single project, this is a big benefit here. All of my platforms are right here. My Android, iOS, Mac, and Windows, they're all right here. And I don't have to have separate projects. I can put my fonts and my images all in there. The build system is multi-targeted, so it knows which one to build for. You still can do specific things for each platform, but they don't have to be separate projects. And if you still want to do the old school Xamarin Forms way of having separate projects, you still can. This single project thing, you just turn it off and then it'll still compile. But it's very, very simple here. And this is how the map or kind of the app starts up. And this is a big benefit of kind of bringing it on and over to the rest of .NET, kind of getting you that consistency. This is the .NET generic host builder. So we create an app, and the builder, this is where you have your middleware. This is where you plug in your services. This is also a great place for you to kind of do your dependency injection. So a lot of things are kind of ready and nice and kind of there for you out of the box, right? So this is just kind of the MAUI Hello World experience. Without that, it's just all XAML, pretty much the same XAML that we have seen, and it's just everything just works, right? So this is MAUI Hello World, and I'll show you this on the Windows side with Visual Studio 2022 tooling and what you need to do, and hot reload. That just works everywhere. That's just so nice. But let's switch over to another project because I want to tie this all together. Blazor, MAUI, minimal APIs. What is this all doing for us? So let me back out, and I'm going to go into a thing called minimal APIs, right? And let's bring up.
While you're going into that, a quick question on the MAUI part of it. Sandy earlier asked, is Razor invited to .NET MAUI World or only Blazor? So I didn't know, since you just showed a MAUI project, if you could talk about that.
That is a great question, and Ed and Jeff can weigh in on this. There's this thing also. Razor is the syntax. Razor is the component model that Blazor uses. It started before Blazor, but now there is a thing called Razor class libraries, which can be brought into Blazor applications running either within WinForms, WPF, or within .NET MAUI. So Ed, anything you want to add to that?
So I believe the Blazor hybrid stuff only works with Razor components. I don't believe you can render CSHTML within those views. Jeff, do you have any confirm or deny? Oh, we lost your audio, Jeff.
I muted myself there for a second. It does only work with Blazor components. It's not something that you can just bring any Razor page or MVC page to interact with. If you need that type of interaction, embed a regular web view and actually go and navigate a Razor website. But the advantage here is package everything so it's rendered and handled inside the application itself.
Exactly.
Very much
let me
like
try
an Electron app. Go ahead.
Yes, yeah. No, and that's very true. Like you have a web view that is capable of rendering anything web, right? So if you want to bring those things over and render them appropriately, it's fine. But to Ed's point, it is meant for Blazor components. And let me try to get to a demo where I can show you a little bit of that. Okay, So let's switch gears a little bit to what I want to talk about. That's minimal APIs and how it gets you started. So let me do a .NET new again, and just to kind of show you the different flavors you got. Right, so if I look at the ASP.NET stuff, you got gRPC now, which is so nice. So you have all of this ASP.NET with Angular, React, Vue. That's what you want to do, but all of your ASP.NET stuff is there. You have two of these things here. There is just an ASP.NET Core empty project, which is web, and then you have the web API. If you did the web API, you get the older stuff, right? Which is, again, nothing wrong with it. It's just all the controllers, your CRUD operations, create, read, update, delete. It's all there, but it's just a little bit of ceremony. It's a little bit of drama, right? And you can do away with that stuff if you just start with web and the minimal APIs, which is this project that I'm showing you. So take a look at how simple this experience is, okay? And I have added a few lines of code here, but remember, for that slide, you need 3 lines, no more, to get started, right? So first thing is my CS proj has .NET Target Runtime, .NET 6, right? Now this is something new, and Alyssa might touch upon this. There are 2 things in C# 10 that actually help out a lot with Blazor, with MAUI, with minimal APIs. It's the language that's giving you more. One is there are global usings. So when I have a using statement like I don't have a using statement here, but if you can envision a using statement at the top of your file, you don't have to repeat that for everything. You just write the word global, and it's just for the entire runtime of your application. And then you can put all of that into a global usings file, and then it's just kind of shared everywhere, so your files are just clean. And then the other thing you get is implicit usings. Based on the type of project you're doing, is it MAUI? Is it minimal APIs? Is it Blazor? The framework is going to give you some things out of the box. You just say enable, and then you don't need to write a single using unless you're bringing in NuGet packages or other things. So it's such a crisp experience here. Now, here's my program.cs. I'm going to make things a little bigger so you can read. So the 3 lines of code that you need is 1 line var builder, so I can have a web application that I can bootstrap, and then app builder.build. Beyond that, it's just more stuff I've added. And then to what Jeff was saying, you have these methods like map get, map set, right? So map get says on index, which is just a whack, I want to say hello world, right? So let's go ahead and run this thing. So if I do a .NET run, so it's going to look through that project and get all my dependencies and do a build and then run it. If I look into my my launch settings here, it's saying, hey, I know how to run this URL or this app locally at localhost HTTPS, mind you, that's the local dev certificate at port 7197. And that's what the runtime says, that, hey, I know how to run this on 7197. So let's go over here to my local host, and you can tell that I run this app first or before. Here we have hello world, 3 lines of code to just get that minimal API out, right? That's all it takes. Now you can build on this, right? So if I do this, if I do a hello Jeff, right? So what I'm doing here is passing in a parameter, right? So it's this line of code that's being activated, hello, with that name being a parameter, and says hello, whatever is the name. Now, what if we do something a little bit more real? Because this is an API, you would likely be fetching your data from the cloud or SQL Server under your table or in a room, doesn't matter. Use Entity Framework, whatever it is that you are wanting to use. Here, I have a simple record here that says person, first name, last name, and we want to say person Elon Musk here. I'm not a big Tesla fan, love it or hate it, but there's no doubt he's pushing the envelope, him and his company. So if I go to person here, just a simple API here, person, I still have JSON formatted, Elon Musk, first name, last name. Now, you don't even need to do this, actually. So if I go look at this line of code, to-dos, I don't have a to-do list. I don't have a to-do item, but it can still spin it up if I ask it to do, because all I'm asking is JSON back from my API. So here's my to-do item. It says something to do, and I don't actually have an object backing it up, but it will still work. So let me go here and do to-dos. Here is your to-do item with something to do. It's not complete. ETA is never, because like some things never get done, right? And if you do some things like, I can't show you the post here because this API is not set up, but you can do post, you can do create and update and delete. You can do all of that. If you do something not so nice, then it actually is fairly good at telling you what it is that you did wrong. Here's an unhandled exception because I tried, let me see, what did I do? I tried casting a string into an integer, and it's saying, hey, I don't know how to do this. Here's your error. And by the way, if I go look at the command line, it actually shows me the error in the command line itself. So you don't have to do this if you don't like it, but this is just a very, very easy way for you to, can get started with APIs. Jeff,
can I interrupt for just a second? Alyssa, as somebody who's done a lot with Node, when we look at the syntax that Sam was showing us, how do you feel about that? Is that something that you're comfortable? Is it the syntax?
No, it looks very, very comfortable, and I'm wondering, my brain keeps going, wait, what was it before? Because I'm like, this looks fine. This is great. What were you doing? Is my big question. So I don't.
Okay, give me 5
it was
minutes.
Scary.
No, it wasn't scary. So give me 5 minutes, Alyssa. Since I already have this app running, I would like to finish up with this. But then let's actually create a new web API project and show you what it was before. It's not scary. It's just it kind of aligns to the MVC model.
Raid was asking, where do I host my minimal API if I do not choose IIS? And so I'm wondering if we can talk about that too whenever you show what was before.
Okay.
Maybe.
It is still a web API project. You can host it anywhere that will run .NET. So IIS is your first bet for a lot of Windows things, but you can host this anywhere. So Ed, Jeff, am I wrong?
You're absolutely right. You want to run it behind Apache. There goes my microphone. You want to run it behind Apache. You want to run it with Nginx. Absolutely, that's completely supported because this compiles and runs as an HTTP app. As an ASP.NET application, and you can put whatever HTTP reverse proxy you want in front of it. And we know how to do that because we've been doing that with Rails applications, PHP applications, Node applications. Put it in a Docker container and host it wherever you'd like at that point. Really flexible solution you can choose here.
Absolutely. Okay, so Alyssa, I will get back to what was it before, and it kind of aligned to the model view controller pattern. It kind of gave you those controllers up front, but if you just want to throw some data out there as an API, maybe you don't need all of that ceremony. That's kind of what modern .NET is trying to do, bring down the barrier to entry, so anybody can just do .NET. And in fact, you don't even need an editor. Like VS Code now runs entirely on your browser, and you can save off things. It's so nice. Okay, so that's my API project. So why don't we keep this running? And I want to show you something else, kind of piggybacking off this, right? So let's open up another terminal, make the text a little bigger, and go to my beloved folder where I keep all my stuff. And now we're going to go into MAUI Blazor. So now we're getting into the hybrid apps with .NET MAUI with Blazor, right? So let's open this up in another VS Code instance. Okay, so that thing is up. And we're actually going to run this thing. So I will grab my commands. And let's go ahead and run this thing really, really quick, okay? So I'm running this on MacCatalyst. It is a .NET MAUI app, but now the UI is not XAML. You don't have to use XAML if you don't want to. So it's kicking around. It's almost done. There you go. All right. So now out comes a desktop application. This is a Mac desktop application. We are reaching the Mac through MacCatalyst, which is Apple's approved way of going from AppKit to UIKit. A lot of folks want to run their iPad apps on their desktop. Here's your way. That's Apple approved. But now we are using that same bridge from .NET MAUI to reach the Mac desktop. But here things look different because we don't have XAML. You can do some XAML if you wanted to have some native UI, but this is all driven through web views. This is all done through Blazor. So this, if anybody who has done Blazor, this looks familiar. This is just the default Blazor template. So I have my home, I have my counter, everything works. And there's one new thing here. It says API, right? So what I'm trying to do is from Blazor, like a hybrid app that's bootstrapped by .NET MAUI, has some Blazor bits. Can I reach minimal APIs? And of course, you can reach it from anywhere. So I go in here, API, and I'm making a call out to the same API endpoint, localhost, and it's giving me back Elon Musk, right? So what happened here? Now, there's one subtle nuance here that I want to point out. So let's first go look at Visual Studio Code. This is the setup that you get when you do MAUI Blazor, right? This is the same template if you do .NET New MAUI Blazor versus in Visual Studio, which I'm going to show you in a minute. It is the MAUI Blazor template. when you get to that template, what it gives you as a starting point is a .NET MAUI app, right? So if I look at MAUI program.cs, nothing is different except for 2 lines of extra code. Well, this one is bringing in like a weather service. You don't need that if you don't want to use it, but it's just one adding that Blazor web view, right? That's all I need. And look at these usings here. That's a lot. We should combine that into one single global usings file and then be done with it. But no different here. I'm bringing in some web views, and the MAUI app is here. Oh, and one thing, because we had talked about CSHTML, let me show one last thing here. On the minimal APIs front, this is not just for JSON here. If you want to use this for other things, like I have a thing here that says map Razor pages. We had a Razor question first, and I can just add support for adding Razor pages. And then if I go down here, and I think I called it some page. So some page. Now this is HTML content, right? So just to prove that the same API, like here is my somepage.cshtml, the same file that we use for Razor syntax, the markup can serve it up. And so if you don't want to serve out JSON, you can serve up HTML as well. But back to the Blazor app. Where did that go? Blazor app.
So with minimal APIs, Emmanuel was asking, is there anything with minimal APIs that aren't supported, like authentication, get data from all parts of packet, etc.?
No, it's literally sitting on top of the ASP.NET pipeline. So any authorization, any authentication should be the same as what you do with any other ASP.NET apps. Yeah. All right. So let's take a look at what Blazor is doing here. So if I look at my main page in my .NET MAUI app, the one thing here, and I can do some XAML, but again, if you're coming from a Blazor background, you most likely don't want to write XAML. Ed gives me a hard time that XAML is very verbose, and yes, it is, but there are tools that can help. But here, we're not doing any XAML. Here, it's just straight up one web view to say, I have some Blazor stuff. Maybe I have brought it over from a web application, and I have just put it in my project. Can you just light it up? And it just says, okay, give me your first component, and it's just the main component. So if I go over to the main Razor, it's just pointing to the routing and it's saying, go to my index view. So if I go over here to my pages, index.razor, that's your first view of hello world and Razor. That's the survey prompt. Everything is Razor. Everything is absolutely just as you expect from a web view. Now, if I look at the API Razor page here, this is a little nuanced here. So what I'm doing here is I want to call out to that local host that's running my minimal API, right? So when this page initializes or when this view initializes, I want to call into this method, and I want to use an HTTP client. And notice how I'm making a call to that local host 72197 person. That's how we get Elon Musk. And we get that entire thing from the minimal API backend, and we just render it. Now, Ed's probably going to not like this, so please don't do this in production. It's not safe, but I'm taking some HTML, I'm taking some JSON from a server and just like literally showing it in a Blazor view. Most likely not the most elegant thing, but just wanted to show you that minimal APIs can be called from anywhere. So what is interesting here is this piece here, localhost. So when I run this as a desktop application on Windows or on a Mac, this is okay because the operating system thinks of desktop apps like a native app. So you can do all types of native things. And when you run it as a desktop app, it knows what localhost is. But if I run this same app on iOS or Android, this thing is going to fail because it's going to launch inside the VM that is an iOS simulator or an Android simulator, and it's not going to know what localhost is, right? So key point here that when you're running things in desktop, you are truly in native world. And everything is native. You have access to all of the out-of-process things that you are used to in desktop world. And in addition, what you don't see here is you are also bringing in, with that one line of code, use MAUI, you are bringing in all of the MAUI expertise. Let me see what that is. So you see that, use MAUI? I have access with that one line of code to a special namespace that is bringing in .NET MAUI essentials. So if you're running this on .NET or iOS or Android, you have access to all those APIs, all your device APIs like camera, accelerometer, all of the things that .NET MAUI and Xamarin Forms exposes. You can do that all from inside of Blazor, right? So this is pretty exciting. Let me close some of this and let's go over to the Windows side because so far it's just been Mac and I'm weird, right? So let's go to Windows. Any questions while I'm doing that switch?
I was actually just replying to Aaron, who was saying it's really interesting, but you're going so fast. And he's like, I know you're not trying to do a tutorial right now, but you know, that might be something that's helpful. And I told him we should have you come on my show, Sam, and just go turtle slow, just like
yes,
really from the ground up, you know.
We struggle with this. Like we don't want to keep you for too long, but there's just like so much stuff to cover. So I'm sorry for talking too fast here, but I'm going to try to wrap up my thing in the next 10-15 minutes so you can get to some more Blazor stuff and hot reload and C# and all the goodness as soon as my Windows comes back on. So if you're just getting started, let me cut that. Yes, you can terminate my process. The minimal API thing was still running. So I quit my browser here. But if you want all of this stuff, that post from David Ortno, that's the best way to kind of get started. Oh, and actually, I should show you. Let me show you this. If I go over to blogs.telerik.com, and I'm getting to this because it's just easy for me to find out. Every Monday, there's a post that goes out that says Sense of Maui. It's just my little way of kind of putting together all the news from the .NET MAUI and world and putting it all together. So start with this post from David Ortno with .NET MAUI. That's going to give you all the bits to run .NET MAUI, to run hybrid Blazor apps. It's just the .NET mobile workload with the .NET MAUI preview bits on VS 2022.
That's perfect, because there was quite a few questions around getting started and resources for beginners and things. So that's really great.
Absolutely. All right, so my Windows is in business, and keep in mind I'm running on a VM while I'm sharing my screen. I do have my Windows tower, but it's a different machine. I don't want to reach that. And plus, like, I can't travel with it, so I'll have to kind of do a remote desktop when I'm on the road. So this is VS 2022, okay? Go get the bits, please, please. This is out in production now. It's ready for prime time, but don't just stop at VS 2022. Get the next preview, which is 17.1, and that's going to give you that MAUI workload, right? So once I'm in Visual Studio, let me open up like a MAUI Hello project, and then I'm going to show you like how, if you just want to get started, where do you start? It has the pre and the preview badge because I'm running the next version, but that's just the best experience on Windows with VS 2022. It's loading up my project, and it's a little slower than usual because I'm on a VM while I'm screen sharing, but it'll come back. And when it does, you're going to see how simple everything is. And actually, one of the things, let's see if I can look this up while it's loading up. Why evolve to .NET MAUI? So if you are kind of wondering what is in there for me why should I jump to .NET MAUI? You don't have to, no one's forcing you. But if you're doing desktop today, if you're doing mobile today, there's a lot of stuff in there. You get more confidence, you get desktop reach. Windows and Mac are good, and they're not reinventing the wheel. We are reaching Windows through WinUI 3, we are reaching Mac through MacCatalyst. Blazor is now welcome. And the single project thing is just so nice for somebody who's done Xamarin development for a long time. For a real world project, Xamarin projects used to get really big and gigantic to manage. Now it's just one single project that's just multi-targeted. Better architecture, we talked about this a little bit, but just the way the apps are being bootstrapped makes it super easy to kind of bring in MVVM frameworks, do some dependency injection. It's all in the app startup. And then the way we render, so when I am writing XAML or C# in a .NET MAUI app, and I want to render native UI for iOS, Android, Windows, and Mac, the way we do that now is through an interface. Now we don't have a straight up renderer, which is very tightly coupled to Xamarin and to iOS. Now it's just a renderer. So give me a button, and that same logic can be used if you're coming from F#, if you're coming from reactive. So a lot of things are welcome, and this is kind of how .NET MAUI opens it up, the architecture, to other things. Device access, like we used to have Xamarin Essentials, now it's MAUI Essentials. Tighter inner loop, of course, there's hot reload, and it's hot reload everywhere, not just for XAML, for C# as well. So let's take a look. I think it's back up now. Okay, here we go. So if you are starting out brand new on Visual Studio 2022, do this. Go to File and go to New and Project. Right in here, you can see based on what workloads you have installed, you can see a lot of things. Do a search on MAUI, right? And it's going to hopefully, if I hit enter, it's going to bring back 3 templates, right? So on my CLI side, you saw like I had like 10 different templates. don't worry about it. You got 3 that are official and they're good to go. The other ones are in preview. So I have a MAUI app. I have a MAUI class library if you just want to reuse a piece of logic across all of .NET.
Listen, as a beginner in the .NET space, I'm worried about it, Sam. There's 1,200 templates, and I'm like, I need an app.
So, yeah, don't get, if you're not looking for it, like don't click on all the workloads. It's just going to give you everything out of the box. So just get what you need, right? So this is simple, 3 things. And the class library here is nice, and this is one of the benefits with .NET 6. It is the same runtime. So you build a class library, you can use it on ASP.NET, you can use it in Blazor or .NET MAUI or WPF. It's the same. And then you have that Blazor MAUI preview, which is that hybrid app with .NET MAUI and preview. So start with the MAUI app. That's going to give you all the things. So I already have an app, so I'm going to close out of this. This is the same exact app that I saw on my Mac. Nothing different. I have all of the platform stuff here: iOS, Android, MacCatalyst, and Windows. My main, the way the app starts up, that's the same. So let's bump up the fonts here a little bit. Let's go to 200%. Oh, that's too big. 150, I think is fine. So here's my main page, which is where my app starts up, and here's my main page.xaml, which is the UI visual tree of how I'm rendering things. So let's see. Okay, here's my XAML. Now, how do you run this app? So when you first install that workload, you're going to get a few things that you may not realize. You're getting, the iOS bits and the Android bits and the MacCatalyst and the Windows bits all together to do all of this stuff. And since you are on a Windows machine, to do an iOS build, you actually do need a Mac somewhere. Now, you don't actually have to have a Mac if you're just, and then this is one of the good things. There are things called hot restart, hot reload, and everything is hot now. But if you just have an iOS device or an iPad or an iPhone, just plug it into your Windows machine. You need the Apple developer account, and then you can sideload, and you can have the same hot restart working. But if you do want to use a simulator, you do need to go hit up some Mac, which is either on the network or on a VM. So there's a nice nifty button here that Visual Studio gives you. It says pair to Mac. So I am already on a Mac as my host machine, so I have already paired this. So it's good to go. So if I click this, it's going to just try doing the same thing, which I already have. So I don't need this. But once you have it paired, so you notice how it's paired to my SAM MacBook Pro, which is my host machine. So with that, all of my things light up here in my dropdown. I can run this on Windows, obviously, because I am on Windows. This is WinUI 3. I can run it on all the Android simulators, which I don't have a lot of Android emulators here. iOS simulators, look at the list here. Oh, it's actually not connected. So let me do a quick pairing. Yes, and connect. So it actually goes and talks to Xcode, makes sure that little bridge is good. We can do an app package build, come back, and then all the simulators light up. And it's just a really nice experience, be it on Android or iOS. And you still have the Windows iOS simulator, so Windows devices will likely have touch, and you can pinch and zoom and work with your MAUI app. So it's doing a quick validation, and in just a second, hopefully, it's checking to make sure Xcode and the mono runtimes are good. And now it has this little icon that says, I am connected. I know your Mac. So with that, I can come down here in the drop down, and I see my iOS simulators. Look at that. All of my iPads, all of my iPhones, which are sitting on my Mac, they show up in Windows because they have done that handshaking, and I can deploy this to any iOS simulator. But let's deploy this on a Windows machine, and I'm going to do a full debug build, because why not? So let's fire that up, and now it's going to run it natively on Windows as a desktop application, as it should be. So it's going to take a second. Yeah, sorry to speak to so fast. I'm trying to give Ed and Alyssa all the time that they need to cover Blazor and C#.
No, so Lucian earlier asked, can the Blazor app find out if it's hosted in a MAUI window? Does it?
Yeah, it's possible. You can, well.
There's a few ways to do that. You're probably going to be bootstrapping that MAUI app, or that Blazor application within the MAUI app. So it's kind of a design time thing, unless you're using the web view outside of the context of a Blazor hybrid app. But if you're bootstrapping that MAUI application with Blazor hybrid, you're going to know, at least from that, you can configure dependencies different through dependency injection and inject unique services to your application that only your Blazor hybrid app would use. And then you can use if-defs for your compiler directives to weed out, am I on Android, am I on Windows, do I want to take different code paths for those sort of things? Those are also tools at your disposal. And I can demo a little bit of that in a few minutes.
Yeah. I mean, and I can talk about this stuff for a long time, but let's kind of split our time. I want to hand it off to Ed and Alyssa, and maybe some of the migration questions we'll tackle them towards the end. But here out comes a little MAUI app. Now it's running on Windows, straight up desktop Windows, and you have all of those things light up, like the live visual tree. So now when I do this on Windows and Visual Studio, I can have a live rendering of the visual tree. I can click around, just like we do with DOM on the web. We can pinpoint on which exact UI element that I am on. And so all of these things light up now. But also, since I'm in debug mode, I can change things. Here, instead of hello world, I can just say MAUI, right? And all I have to do is hit Control-Save to save my file. And before I should have done it split screen, but you can see like it's updated, right? So that is XAML hot reload, and that's been there for a long time with Xamarin Framework or Xamarin Forms, and it's just now shared. You have the same exact experience with WPF or any other place where you're doing XAML. It is, Dimitri Lylin and the teams over there. The XAML hot reload experience is the same everywhere, which is a gigantic step in the right direction. Now, if I do a click me here, this is just a counter. Now, this is the thing that is new. This is the .NET hot reload. So now you can not just change your visual tree, which is, again, a big step, but now you can also change your C# code while your app is running, right? So this is just doing count plus plus. So let me go in here and do, let's just do count, +5. Why not? So we're going to update that by an increment of 5 every time. So I'm going to save this. You have this little icon here that says hot reload, right? So you have to, when it's lit, you just have to hit it once and you have to wait for it to come back. That means it is doing that little compile and then pushing the bits out and waiting for you to come back. Now it's back. So now we can go back to the app, and it was incrementing by 1. So now, hopefully, now you see that it's incrementing by 5, right? So this is the developer inner loop. This is the thing we talk about all the time, right? And yes, I mean, if you do other things like with all the web stuff, with all the web ways of bundling up your components, if you do Flutter and other things, this loop has been fast, and .NET is now just as fast, if not faster than the other guys here. So hot reload, and this is the big thing that Maddie Leisure and everybody wants you to take home. It works everywhere. Hot reload, if you do things CLI, if you don't want to do Visual Studio, you can do that as well. It can watch the files, and it can just push out the bits that it needs to. But the Visual Studio experience is really, really nice. And for me to just have this app running on a separate monitor and just be able to write some code and hit one button and see C# code being compiled and XAML code being compiled on the fly, that's real nice, right? Jeff, did you have anything to add to this?
My mic again. There it goes. I can hear this going in and out. I really like. No, give me a second here. I gotta check.
Our camera is there. You go. Now we can hear you.
Yeah, something with that mic that I need to check out. I love the portability of all these capabilities. It really gives me the feeling that C# is everywhere. The fact that it's not these pockets of things only function this way, and especially being able to lift Blazor content and drop it into these various applications as a pseudo cross-platform user interface, even though it's really HTML and it's hosted inside of a web browser. We won't look at that too much. But, my gosh, as a web developer, I'm so happy to see it. And I mean, look at that. That's something that felt like was kind of owned by the Electron folks for such a long time.
Yeah.
And being able to do it now with Blazor, it feels like a complete solution that's maintainable now and deployable with my applications.
Yeah. So I had written a post on, how all the ways you can bring in Blazor, and Electron has been the thing that we have used. And, a lot of people tried to complain that it's a little heavy-handed. And yes, because Electron gives you two things out of the box. It's Node.js as a runtime and Chromium as the engine. So you have a consistent canvas on which to lay down your app. And there's nothing wrong with it, except you need to know what you're using it for. Like VS Code and Figma, these are Electron apps, and they're running beautifully. It's just for the type of apps you're building, you may not need all of that heavyweight. And this is where the Blazor Web View is so nice. So I got one last thing here to show before I hand it over to Ed and Alyssa. This one here is the same Blazor app, but I'm doing a couple more extra things here. So here is the Blazor app running on desktop, right, on Windows. So this is actually a .NET MAUI app, but everything from under that is Blazor, as you can tell. But I showed you like localhost. There's and folks on Twitch, you may have seen me do this, but this is a desktop application. So what I have is a little button that says do something native, and I bring up a notepad, and it says enter something. Notice there is nothing here back on the web view. So we can say Jeff is awesome, right? And I save that file, and I close that file, and I can bring it right back. So right in here, we have a .NET MAUI app. We went out of process. We launched Notepad. We wrote something. We saved it. We brought it back into a web view. So it is absolutely native. You have all the access to .NET MAUI essentials. So here's the 4 lines of code. And this is like Elon Lipton from the .NET team that I stole this code from. It's just like hilarious. 4 lines of code, get a file, use system diagnostics process to start up Notepad and wait for it to type, and then it comes back into this H3 message. So Blazor running on desktop, be it Mac, be it Windows, is very, very welcome. And even within Blazor code, like this is just a Razor file, I can do .NET specific things. Like I can do system specific things like bringing in system.io. So this is absolutely real, and it's a great way for you to kind of think about modernizing and migrating apps. So I do want to show some more demos of like, what if you didn't want to do MAUI? What if I am just stuck with the WPF app and I want to bring Blazor in? So I want to come back to that, but why don't we switch gears, because I know Ed and Alyssa are waiting and doing. So Ed, if you're ready, we're going to hand it over to you.
All right, Sam.
If I can find you in the list. There you go. Now you're the presenter.
There we go. I think I'm good now. Yeah, so I wanted to talk about some of the big improvements in, sorry, GoToWebinar keeps popping up over my UI where I can't read my screen. So I wanted to talk about some of the major improvements in Blazor. So we got a lot of new things that came down the pipe. One of the things that I think is really important is in regards to performance, and there's a lot of performance improvements in this version of Blazor. So we got smaller packages through IL linking. So the IL linker has been improved greatly. And this applies to MAUI apps as well. So if you consider the code that you're shipping with your APKs to be a concern, you want to have those as small as possible. That's the same concern on the web. We want our DLL files to be as slim as we can get them. And the IL trimmer has been improved greatly. I think the stats that we got from .NET Conf where it was about 1.2 meg of Hello World project, and that's down to about a meg now with the new IL linker bits in place. So the startup of your application is going to be much, much faster. And in addition to that, one of the features that we got was the ability to preserve state when you're pre-rendering an application. So that's what I wanted to demo, is how we can do pre-rendering with Blazor and Blazor WebAssembly. Pre-render those views on the server using Razor, and then keep that state persistent with our front end. So I've got a Blazor application here that is hosted with a .NET server application. So I have my client, and I have my server application, and I'm going to use pre-rendering here. And I'm in the wrong view mode here. I need to be in my project or my solution view. It's in a folder view. So I've got my server solution here, and you'll notice in my server solution, I have a pages folder. And this is basically Razor pages. And I have a host and a layout CSHTML file. So we're not using the index HTML that you would normally find up in your www root folder of your WebAssembly application. The app is actually being bootstrapped on the server through this host.cshtml file. So you'll notice in this host.cshtml file, we have the application rendering with a render mode of WebAssembly pre-rendered. So this is telling the CSHTML file to render a component, which is the app component. And this is common terminology that you're seeing throughout all of this new .NET stuff in regards to Blazor and Blazor Hybrid is we render this app component. That's our root-most component of our application. So in our MAUI application, this is in our main XAML file, and in our server Blazor app or server ASP.NET application, this is in our CSHTML file, and we're rendering that root component, that app component, with pre-rendering enabled. So on my consuming, client side of this application, I've got a fetch data component, and my fetch data component is that demo that you always see where we're grabbing some weather data. And let's see here, getting an error trying to run this. Let's try this again. And of course, this isn't going to work. Give me 1 second, make sure it's on server. Again, that's a server hosted application. So it's trying to run the WebAssembly parts without the server and getting nowhere. All right, so this is our weather demo that you've probably seen multiple times if you've ever seen a Blazor demo. This is pulling data from a web API controller and displaying it on our client with our Blazor application. So we're going to get some data from our server and put it in an array of forecasts. And when that data is not null, we're going to open up a table and just iterate over those forecast items. And we're going to do this with pre-rendering now. So this view is actually rendered on the server completely. And then we're passing in the persistent state to this component. So when it initializes, it's going to check and it's going to look at the application state and execute the rendering on persistent method and just checking to see if we have data. So we're going to say, do we have data? And it's serialized as JSON here. We'll look at that again in a moment to see where this is coming from. So we're going to take the data from JSON that has been supplied in that persistent state. And then if we find that data, we're able to serialize it. We're going to put that in a output variable called restored. And if nothing's found, we'll fail over into just using a calling out to the web API and getting that forecast. So we're able to see if there's state there. If there is, we can use it. If not, we'll have to make a HTTP callback to finish rendering that page. But we have full control over this and how we would like to handle that persistent state and just guide that client experience there. So we're able to pre-render this entire page. This is going to give you that instant loading feeling, which without spinners and loading messages and things that you might find in a application that's not using pre-rendering. So we are able to also set how our data is serialized between the server and the pre-rendered component as well. So again, I'm using JSON here to do that serialization. This is a little similar to something that you might have seen in web forms, but this is not view state. So this is a much lighter, simpler thing than view state ever was. So don't think that this is another way of getting back to that view state. We're not abstracting away the web from the components and things like that with this type of state. It's just giving the client experience enough to know what data it has, so it can either get more data or continue with the state that it has already been given from the pre-rendered bits from the server. So that's a huge win for Blazor and the speed of Blazor applications. So that was one of my absolute favorite features that came with this latest update. We also are able to write to the head of our Blazor applications. So let's go back to the running app for a moment. And in the tab up top here, I just lost my Zoom tool. Give me a sec. Let's see, I just did a Windows update here, so we missed some things. So up in the title of the application, we're able to control this title now through code in our Razor files. So this is something we didn't have in .NET 5. This gives us a lot of new leverage in .NET 6 with our Blazor applications. So we have a page title component now, and this controls that title that you see in the address bar of the application. So on each page in this application, you'll see I have a weather forecast title here. On index, I have a index title and counter. These are all basically the names of the components that we're rendering. And then as we navigate to these items, you'll see that the title of that tab is updated with each of those pages. So we have full control over that. We also have control over the head of the HTML as well. So previously in Blazor applications, this section of our application was out of reach for our Blazor app. So up in the head here, we couldn't control anything in this section without the use of JavaScript. Because remember, just as I showed with that pre-rendering demo, that the application itself runs inside of that main shell of the application. So you don't actually see the pages here, and everything that is rendered inside of this app section of the page is all we have control over. It's a single page application. So in order to reach out into the head, we need some help. Before that was with JavaScript, and now we actually have some APIs to deal with this. So how we do that in Blazor now is we have a new component available to us. And this is the head content component. So in our page, we can add a head content component, and then we can control various aspects of the head of our document. So we can do things like switch out CSS files, add new CSS there, control the meta information here, add descriptions, other metadata that we need. This is a really big benefit for SEO for our applications. If these are applications we want to put on the web and have Google and Bing index these files, controlling the head and the metadata of those things is a big SEO consideration. So with this head content component, we can add those meta tags and other tags to the head section of our application. And if we look in our in the layout of our application here, whether it's layout CSHTML, which is the wrapper for pre-rendered Blazor applications, or if it's on the WebAssembly side and index CSHTML, we'll have a component which is our head outlet. And our head outlet is where that component, this head content component, gets rendered. So this gives us the ability to control this section of our head of our application now. And notice this has a pre-render mode as well, because again, we're just rendering a component here. So we're going to render the head outlet component with WebAssembly pre-rendered, and that will be the location where all of our content goes. So we're able to control this now as part of our Blazor applications. We can control the title, the head content. That's big stuff. That's Microsoft listening and the Blazor team listening to feedback. This was a huge feedback item that people were posting on the GitHub repository. So I'm glad to see it was taken into consideration and implemented very well. All right. We've got some other improvements along with those. With the new version here, we also have dynamic components. I don't have a demo of dynamic components handy, but essentially you can take some sort of metadata from your application. Maybe you're getting some data from the server, and you can dynamically change components on the fly and render dynamic UIs. So that was added with .NET 6 as well. Of course, we have hot reload across the board on our Blazor applications, as we do throughout the .NET ecosystem. Ahead of time compilation is another big one that we can talk about, but I don't have a demo for that one either. That's a big thing that was demoed at .NET Conf. So if you have a long running process, something that's very processor intensive, it may benefit you to offload that to ahead of time compilation. So this bypasses the interpreted mode of Blazor or of .NET in WebAssembly, and instead those bits are compiled ahead of time. They run much, much faster, closer to what you'd see them running at on, say, the desktop. It's going to be about 70% of the desktop is roughly what WebAssembly can handle. So you're going to see a huge performance increase there. So if you're doing massive calculations, you want that to be able to run on the client, you can do that with AOT compilation. Again, at .NET Conf, there's a great demo there. Actually, a couple of them. One by Steve Sanderson, doing some satellite calculation type of things. And then there is another one where Dan Roth does some Photoshop-like image editing live in the browser, and AOT can really boost the performance of that type of thing. Query string parameters is a feature that was added to Blazor in .NET 6 that lets us capture query string parameters very easily. Again, we had to do stuff with JavaScript before to make this possible in .NET 5. So now to pass in values from a query string, we can actually use a query string parameter attribute. So if we want to pass something into our component here from our query string, we could set up a parameter. And then in our code, we need to define that this is coming from a query string. So we'd use the supply parameter from query attribute on top of that as well. And then we just define our property. So this is going to be a public, say, string, and we'll call this, actually, let's do an integer here, and we will get a count from the from a query string. So we could start our counter from a query string if we wanted to. So we could say get set here. We'll go ahead and give this a default in case nothing is supplied from a query string. And then we need to, let's see, we'll start, actually we'll do current count. Let's go ahead and make current count a property. That might work a little bit better. So we'll say current count. We'll pull that from a query string, and then we will set it as a default of 0 there. We're going to have to update some of our code here as well. So we should be able to set this now from a query string just by making those simple changes there. So let's go ahead and rerun this one. And then we'll go to our counter component. We should be able to restart that counter based on a query string because that simple parameter abstracts away the API for us. So you can see we started at a count of 0 here. And then if we come up in the address bar, we put in a question mark and say current count equals 5. We should be able to start that count at 5. And there we go. So I'll zoom in. We have our URL here, current count equals 5. And then our counter started at 5 now. So just that quick and easy, we mapped a parameter from a query string to code running in our component. And that, again, used to be something that we had, excuse me, had to do with JavaScript before. So just as easy as adding the supply parameter from query, we're able to do that in Blazor in .NET 6. Another thing that we can do, sorry, is there a question?
Yeah,
heard somebody piping in.
No, I mean, yeah, so there are a couple of questions and there are some things we want to address, but maybe you can finish up. So how many more things do you got?
I was just going to mention we could put required parameter attributes on this as well. So if we wanted to extend this and say that we want this data to be supplied, so if somebody was going to come into, say, our index page here, let's stop this from running, and pull in a counter component, we want to make sure that the current count is set. If we don't set this, we will get a compiler warning because I added that attribute to the counter component. You'll see it's underscored in green now, and it says the current count was not provided. So we're putting a little bit of help in there for consumers of this component to let them know that they should set that current count when they're using that component, or something might fail at runtime. So it doesn't stop the compiler from compiling. It's not a compiler error, but it is a compiler warning that gives the user heads up that something might not work at runtime. So that's a nice feature there as well. We have error boundaries. Those are really easy to implement. We can wrap a piece of our code in an error boundary component. And then if something were to go wrong inside of this component, so for example, we could wrap our error boundary here. And if something with our count code were to go wrong, we would get a graceful error displayed on the screen. We talked about pre-rendering. Performance is improved across the board. We've got accessibility improvements. And then, of course, you showed a lot of the bits with .NET MAUI, so I don't think we need to go over those again. So we can move on to the next segment here, Sam. I know we had some C# 10 to talk about, some other things.
And we want to save at least like 20 minutes towards the end to kind of talk about migration. But if I can actually steal the focus back, because there are a couple of things I forgot to mention while we were transitioning. So first up, folks, you heard me talk about MAUI, right? So let's do a quick poll to see how you all feel about MAUI. So, you know, .NET MAUI has been cooking for a while, and it just has a lot of dependencies. So GA is coming early next year. How do you feel about this? Do you feel it's yet another UI framework, or are you excited with the prospect that you can now write straight up .NET from a single project, multi-targeted, reaching mobile and desktop? Yay! There we go. See, I love the first 40%, and I perfectly understand the other two as well. So again, for a lot of enterprises, this is very new, and it's perfectly fine to wait and watch, right? So you know, hopefully the promise is there. You can see the excitement. But I wanted to address one last thing before I go. We go over to Alyssa here. I think let's see, in the chat room, Raid was asking or made a comment about, you know, a lot of things we are showing here. I think the bottom line is like one weekend isn't enough to catch up on all things .NET Conf. We need to go watch more of that stuff. But a lot of what we have presented so far has been .NET stuff. So where can we help? Well, we are all here to help, you know. So if I head over to blogs.telerik.com, you can see we put out a post, and we have 3 major releases every year, right? R1, R2, R3, and in between we have service packs, and we are kind of combining them into a single monthly update. So first, let's start with this. So if you're running on .NET 6, and if you want to be on Visual Studio 2022, everything that we do runs on all of these latest bits. Telerik UI for Blazor, ASP.NET Core, WPF, WinUI, WinForms, you name it. If you want to do reporting, if you want to do mocking, we are there as well. especially with some of the extra things you need. So we have special desktop extensions that might help us. And then let's go down here. I love the REPL, obviously, that's Blazor. You can do that on any browser. But the WinForms and WPF designers, those work on .NET 6 as well. So we are here to help with all of the UI bits. And the one thing I didn't show you is if I head over here, this is, again, all of this is on blogs. Every month we put out a blog to say, here's what's new. Again, you can see the number of updates all across Kendo UI, all across Blazor, Xamarin, .NET MAUI being in preview. So all of this is there. And we'll talk about some of the migration things, but if you are wondering about the MAUI stuff, so here I am on Telerik.com, and if I head down to the MAUI bits, this is how this is in preview because MAUI is in preview. You can play around with all of the stuff. Just hit that big button for download, and let me show you this real quick. So here I have progress, and we are using semantic versioning, so things are getting serious. That's MAUI 0.2.0. So I'm going to go in here. All of your binaries live in there. All of the platform-specific stuff. We have the NuGet package as a single nupkeg. We have license, and then we have examples. This is the SDK example. So let me go ahead and pull that up really quickly. Open up a terminal, and I'm going to let's do an iOS build here real quick. So make that bigger, and let's fire up an iOS build. So straight up .NET build run on iOS, but we are building a project that has Telerik UI for MAUI in it. So again, if you are considering moving or migrating your apps to MAUI, or just kind of starting afresh and you need some UI, we are here to help, as we always have for the last, 20 years now. So this time I'm doing an iOS build. So you have my iOS default simulator being the iPad mini 6th generation simulator come up, and it's going to spin for a second, and you're going to see a sample app that we are bundling in the download itself. So you can play around, you can see all of the UI. It's nothing fancy, but it has all of the UI all in one place if you wanted to look. And the Blazor release, the last Blazor release was a huge release, so a lot of updates. This is all running on .NET 6, all running on .NET MAUI. We have barcodes, the data grid is here too. Now, we are a little careful here because it's not quite ready. Some of the APIs might change, but I mean, it's there for you to kick around and tell us what's working and what's not. And so if you want gauges and charts and let's see, where are my charts, if I can find the charts. There we go, charts, lots and lots of different types of dozens of charts that you're used to. All of them just work on .NET 6 and the MAUI. So we are here to help with all of the MAUI bits, Blazor bits, all of the Telerik stuff. They all just work. And we're going to talk about this a little bit, but we have been also kicking around. So the question is, all of the Blazor UI that you see for the web, do they work on desktop? Do they work on .NET MAUI? And the answer is yes, but it's not quite ready yet because it's not officially shipped out here. You can see, I think this repo is now public, so you can go look. So we can have Telerik UI for Blazor now rendering inside of WPF, inside of WinForms, inside of a .NET MAUI app. So this is the future. You can do all of that. It is just inside of a web view as compared to the full-on desktop or full-on web. So we have to be a little careful as to how we do some of the configuration bits, but I mean, you can see the promise. Like all of the Blazor bits that you're used to for the web, they work on desktop now. With that, how about we do one more question, and then we hand it over to, we talked about the Blazor stuff again. Let's do a Blazor question, I think. If you are building a desktop app today, right, be it you're starting off a greenfield app or you are kind of dealing with an existing app, what would you use right now? If you had the say to go build whatever in whatever stack, what would you do? Would you do WinForms and WPF? And keep in mind, WinForms and WPF do run on .NET 6. Would you do WinUI 3? Would you do .NET MAUI to reach Windows or Mac? Or would you do hybrid? Or would you do something completely different? What's your take?
Is UWP like rolled into WinForms in this, or is it just like not part of the survey?
Well, no, it can be a part of this, but the thing is, like, UWP is essentially what is powering WinUI 3. So if you wanted to start a brand new Windows project today, and if you had the liberty and the luxury to start a brand new Windows project your way, then WinUI 3 is probably the answer, and that actually writes on top of UWP to reach, the .NET native stack, while Win32 is for the older Windows stack.
Now's probably
Alright,
a good
so go
time to
ahead.
address a question I saw as well. So there was a question about performance of Blazor Hybrid versus Electron. So with Blazor Hybrid, you're running all of the code in .NET in its native runtime on the environment that you're on. So if you're on Android, you're running in Mono. If you're on the desktop, you're running in WinUI 3. Those are not using WebAssembly. If you're on a PWA, for example, that's using, or sorry, an Electron app or a PWA, those are going to use WebAssembly, which is slower than the native runtimes on the native environment. So it's going to be quite a bit faster.
Yeah, good point. Okay, I was super curious about this poll, and this is like so spot on with what we think. So if you're doing WinForms and WPF, you are good to go. You are fine. You run on .NET Framework, you run on .NET 3, 5, 6, you're fine. But a lot of folks are excited about hybrid apps with Blazor and .NET MAUI, and understandably. And the .NET MAUI part of it being so new and experimental, if you just want to go straight out desktop, I can understand that. But you see the lines here in the sand. This is good to see.
This is interesting.
I'm like baffled by the WinUI 3 2%. I'm like, what?
No,
I don't know. I was excited when I heard about WinUI.
Jeff,
I'm not surprised by it. Yeah, I'm not surprised WinUI is so low.
You're not? Okay.
No, not at all. WinForms WPF leading the way. I'm pleasantly surprised by that because the teams have put a lot of work in making sure that you have a great experience bringing your WinForms and WPF skills into .NET 6, and certainly seeing all the big performance improvements, single file deployment. It's interesting to see that as the top choice here.
Yeah. Well, to each to their own, like they say. So, Alyssa, if you're ready, I'm going to make you.
Yeah, I'm ready. I was laughing at Drew's comment. He said anything that allows me to avoid XAML. So that was giving me a little bit of a chuckle.
Hurts my feelings, but okay. Yeah, whatever suits you. All right.
All right. We should be seeing. I think you're seeing perfect.
Yes.
The slides that I've prepared. So for those of you who don't know, or joined us late, I am Alyssa Nichol, and I do things mostly in Angular and in the JavaScript world. And so I actually have a JavaScript Girl and a .NET World show where I'm learning .NET. And I loved what, forgive me if I mispronounce your name, Demolar said about what's your advice for someone coming into .NET? It seems there's so much to learn. What is the best starting point? And that's really how I felt. So I'm super excited. If you're new to .NET, that you're jumping in, come join me every Tuesday on my show. It's a really fun time, and I would say, because I kind of just like, as a person who was new to the .NET world, I just kind of jumped in and I was like, hey, let's make a WinUI app. And then after that, I made a Blazor app. And then after that, I think a WPF app. And now I had a couple of friends who were like, I really think you should take it back to the basics. So tomorrow is another episode on Back to the Basics with C#, building out a console app. So Demolar, my advice to you is to learn C#. It's a really great place to start. And it can really, like, after that, you have to decide, do I need a mobile app? Do I need a desktop app? Do I need a web app? And then from there, that'll really help you decide what stack to go down and find. But yes, that's my advice for you. Come hang out on the Twitch channel. It's a really good time. But I'm going to cover some of the C# 10 new bits. And again, this is from a girl who is just now learning C#. So I have these amazing gentlemen on the show that are going to be here as our backboard of solid experience who can just really help us. So I'm going to do my best to explain some of these new features. But yes, hopefully it's more of a conversation than me telling you. So extended property patterns. I think, Sam, you were saying you didn't know about this one earlier. So beginning in C# 10, this is the way that you used to have to do it. And now below is the way that you can do it. So you can nest your properties with the little dot there instead of having to have extra brackets. So it's cleaner. It looks like if you're just like glancing over this, you might not see it. So it's where it says method.name on the inside there. We're cleaning up a little bit. So yeah, extended property patterns was one of the, I'm really just highlighting, there was, I think like 15 or 20 new like features or additions to C#. So I'm just gonna be highlighting a couple of the ones that I thought were really cool. The next one, the guys actually already talked about. It's global usings. And so if importing the same namespace in each app is getting you down, C# introduces a new pattern that lets you define these imports across the entire project using the global keyword. And I guess I've heard it's recommended that you put these global imports in a separate file, like a usings.cs or imports.cs, but I'm not sure. I guess like Sam or Fritz or Ed. I'm assuming that's the new way, right? Like have your import file.
Like pane-driven development. If you're having a lot of usings in every one of those files, just put it all together. And it's okay. Now keep in mind it's global, so you do it in one file. It kind of cascades to every file. But if you don't want to do anything in every file, just put it all together in one file.
See, we've had this in Razor for so long that this just feels like it should have happened before. So in Razor, we have imports.razor, and this is basically the same idea. This global usings affects all CS files, where imports.razor affects all Razor files, but they do essentially the same thing.
Okay. I love what Mariana just said. She said, it's not a question, but I wanted to say I'm a woman, started .NET when I was 50. Makes me feel better about joining so late to the game. Because like I said, a lot of my friends just know this stuff, even if they're not working in it. And I'm like, why is this like a prereq? Everyone seems to know C# and .NET. But another one, default struct values. This one, so I don't really understand structs. I feel like I need to have you guys on the show, and so we can just go over at the concept of a struct. I was like last night, like racking my brain over these. I was like, what? I'm not really, like a lot of people are using the definition struct to define it, and I'm like, I give up. So, but they had the opportunity. Oh, yes, Fritz.
Sure.
Sorry, I can't see your camera, so you gotta.
I'm over here. I'm hiding. Like, anyways, a struct is effectively the same as a class in that you can define an object and it has various properties to it. You can even put methods on it. There are some limitations in it. I'm not going to get into those limitations right now, but think of it similarly, but it's a value type. So where a class sticks around because it's a reference type and it kind of lurks in memory and it hangs out over there on this thing called the managed heap, the struct, as soon as it goes out of scope because you've left the method or the class that references it is no longer available, it immediately is reclaimed from memory. So a lot of the performance tuning that's happening right now for .NET is we're moving things into structs and other stack-based memory so that we're not allocating lots and lots of memory out on the heap and seeing this memory bloat occur. Things get reclaimed and cleaned up very, very quickly when you use structs. And by having default values.
I'm assuming they're not an old concept to C#, right? Like they've been around.
They are an original concept. It's one of these things. It's one of these things like when you're cleaning out your house and you go in the back room, it's like, hey, I remember this box that I packed from college and it's been sitting here in the back closet. And wow, look at all the cool stuff that I got in there. And folks are looking at, hey, we want to tune for performance. Look at all this cool stuff we got here. And we can use this to now significantly reduce the amount of memory we're allocating. I'm
just amazed because coming from a JavaScript world, I would assume C#'s been around for a long time. Yeah. These things are probably pretty solid. So it's amazing to me that there was a couple new things that happened with Struct in C# 10. And so it's amazing to me that the language can be evolving or changing still, even though it's been around for so long. I would have thought it was like perfect, like.
So what's interesting, and there's a great conversation that I want to kind of dig up and share with the world. When we saw Sam talking about minimal APIs, as minimal APIs were being designed, there were features they wanted to put in there. Somebody had a question about, how do I do security with this? How do I do authentication, authorization? you add attributes directly onto the lambdas, but that wasn't a thing that you could do before, right? When we look at our mappings that we do in JavaScript, you can't really put attributes and decorate with hints. That was something that was very native to .NET that we wanted to be able to continue doing, but it wasn't a feature. It's now a feature in C# because the ASP.NET team said, hey, this feels like the right syntax for us. And the C# team worked with them to get the syntax in. So there's stuff like that that to make the frameworks faster, they went back to the language team and said, hey, we'd like to make these things possible. And the language team said, sure, we'll put that in the compiler.
There's a question that came in that's topical here. It's asking about how does a struct compare to a record? And Alyssa, I don't know if you have the record struct in your slides here, but
so yeah, I have on the next one. Let me pull it up.
Oh, there we go. Perfect.
And I think it goes to this, and then now it's like that. So is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, that's actually about pretty much what the question's asking, I think.
Yeah, because I saw Scott's question, and I love Sergio's comment because he goes, it gets even hairier when you bring records in the conversation. So you're talking about a class versus a record versus a struct. So I would love for us to address this right now because as a new person in .NET, I'd be like, I'm just going to use a class because that one sounds safe.
And you know what? Many folks do use that by default on all the things, and it's not wrong. It is very safe.
And a record, by definition, is a class. By default here, it is a class. If you use the struct modifier on it, it does become a struct. So a record can be both a class and a struct. A record generally comes with some nuance of, I'm going to have immutable properties. But that, again, is something that can be customized as well.
Right, when you need that data transport object. I'm just taking data from this service over here and I want to put it on that user interface over there. Record is a real nice way to do that, prevent things from changing, but you're allocating memory because it is a reference type. If we can make it a struct, now it's smaller, faster, and immediately cleaned up.
So I have a quick, before you guys go away again, I wanted to talk about Andrew's question. And it was in regards to, I'm going to go back. I think it was in regards to global usings. Burp, burp. And he was asking if global usings cause problems, like, I guess, in the VB6 days? Was that a thing? You guys might have to let me know if that's a thing.
I'm looking for the question.
Yeah, let me see. I'm going to pull it up real quick. Go to meeting. There's his question. Reshare the slide. Okay.
Without looking at it, like my hesitation sometimes for this is if you have everything together, sometimes you might run up against aliases or, like conflicts, like the same thing being called two different things. So use an alias. So if you are bringing in a namespace that is something that might be too close to something else you're bringing in, use an alias and just call it like a shorter name somewhere. But otherwise, like all of this is just being loaded up in memory. Like it's better to just do it in one place, I would say.
Yeah, his exact question was, doesn't the global usings open up the problem in VB6 where maintainability gets affected? So I didn't know about the maintainability issue in VB6, but it doesn't sound like it is an issue now? Question mark.
Well, I mean, if you keep all of this stuff in one place and then eventually if you don't use it, you are loading up something that you don't need. And if you open the global usings file, it might just give you a kind of a grayed out look to say, hey, you're loading up something that you're not using. But otherwise, like, I don't know, you might need hugs if you're still doing VB6. And I still do VB6 as well.
Aww.
Sam, you make me sad.
So a quick recap. So you can now do default struct values. So like we're talking about refining the struct, you can create your own parameterless constructor in a struct. Before you were stuck with the default implementation that initializes the struct's default values. And so if we go to the next one as well, you have apparently it was annoying limitation of C#9, but the structs was that records were always reference types. So in some scenarios, it's better now that you can go ahead and declare a record struct like this, and that's what we were talking about earlier. And I think, yeah, that's the old way, that's the new way if you want to go ahead and do that. And the next one, constant interpolated strings. I thought this was really interesting. I guess now you can go ahead and have a const as a string and not get this error, but before, if you wanted to change that like variable string to a const, it would throw an error. So I don't know if any of you want to speak to this new tidbit.
So the place that I ran into this, and I'm sorry, Sam, if I jumped in before a little bit quick here. The place I ran into this is I wanted to use name of in my interpolation, right? So we can put name of and reference the name of our class or the name of the method that you're interacting with. So I wanted to have a nice error message that referenced the name of, right? We can use that name of method to grab that code name. And it also allows us then to prevent when refactoring happens, right? To ensure that any place that we reference that text all continues to look the same. So I was using name of and running into this as an error, and now that it's fixed, fantastic, no big deal. I also was using a couple of if defs to pass in information, or I was grabbing like I think I was trying to do something where I was grabbing the version or some assembly information, and I wanted to drop it into a message like this. So being able to do that now and grab those types of IDs and have it embedded in there so that at compile time, it's got the right thing in the constant. It's a nice to have. It was just annoying before, and the way to get around it was a public static read only string.
Okay. Oh, okay. I was going to say it's just you'd have to do public static read only. That's what you had to do.
Yep. So now, it becomes a lot easier to read because it's just a constant. And it's embedded instead of having to be calculated at first run.
Very cool. Yeah, in regards to what we were talking about in the earlier conversation, Menachem was saying that struct is coming from C++. Is that a thing? Like, do they often pull concepts into C#, or I guess originally when it was written, pull concepts from C++? Is that
Can I answer
something
this,
I should have known about?
Somebody's
got to. Somebody's got to.
Well, here's the thing, Alyssa, and those of you out there, Microsoft has folks that there's like 7 or 8 language designers that meet together every week and talk about language features. You've got the guy that invented TypeScript, the folks that manage VB, C#, F#, Q#, Python. These folks are all in the same room. Plus you have Herb Sutter, who's effectively the head of the C++ design board, all sitting in the same room discussing language features and how they're evolving this. The amount of programmer knowledge that goes through that room each week is ridiculous. And these people, they're lifting concepts from these languages and saying, it'd be really cool if I could do that in my language over here also. So you'll see F# features make it into Python, C++ features make it into C#, because they're all working together and it makes sense for them to help each other and make all of our jobs easier. Like, there's no mistake that C# features get into TypeScript, right? So, and TypeScript features are then.
And thank God for TypeScript, because for me, that was my gateway drug into C#.
Okay, we have 10 minutes left.
Plenty of time. Lightning round.
Almost done. I got like 3 more things I'm going to highlight. I'm going to whiz through them. File scope namespaces. This one was hilarious. My husband, he is a JavaScript developer as well, and he was looking over my slides and he said, these 2 pieces of code are the same. And I laughed at him and I was like, no, babe, they're totally different. And he's like, nope, they're the same. And I was like, wait for it. You'll see it. So yes, file scope namespaces, you have to have the semicolon, but it is essentially reducing what is it, like the nested
indentation, yes.
hierarchy cruft, right? Because it's taking that out of the nested bit. So I didn't know if I really like, I think I have it on the next slide. I was questioning it whenever I was looking at that, and I was like, what am I missing here? Because it's very simple, right? Like you're just taking out of the nesting, like out of the nested business, putting it at the top. You have the semicolon. Okay, cool. And so I loved what Young Coder on Medium had to say about it, that this sort of detail may seem trivial, but it's actually very valuable low-hanging fruit for the language optimization. And large studies show that examining like catastrophic programming failures suggests that the same is easily avoidable, right? And so reducing the length of your code through some of these boilerplate changes or these syntax cleanups, it can reduce the time that it takes to review and reduce cognitive load that it takes us to process it, which leads to less bugs in the end, right? So I liked that, and I thought it was a good way of explaining how some of these are valuable, because when I was looking at it, I was like, wait, it's just like plopping the namespace at the top. I didn't really at first understand it or grok it. So did anyone want to say anything to that, Fritz?
What we found was that so many folks only had one namespace per file. So they would have namespace and they would start the block, and there was never any additional namespaces. And when anybody can go out and analyze GitHub and look at all the open source C# code that's published and look at code styles, and they find that literally 99.9999% of code out there only has one namespace per file. Come on. Let's give you the option to just say this file is in this namespace.
Yeah.
It really wasn't adding a whole lot of
totally
value with those brackets.
No. But if you still need to do it, you can. The other syntax isn't going away. So yeah, this one.
Oh, it's not? Oh, so it's not like that's gonna break or something now.
Nope. It's still available.
Okay.
But for those of us that are lazy and only want to write one line, there you go.
Awesome. So there was a couple of things as I was reading through articles on like what's new in C#, and there were some things I guess that were really expected. I don't know if it was just because the proposal like had said it should come out. And so I loved, again, what Young Coder said, you can't count your chicken array before it's instantiated. I was like on the couch late last night, just cracking up, rolling around with that joke. That just really, it got me good. But there was a couple of things like, I think required properties that people thought might make it in. And then also null parameter checking. And so not this round, and I guess we're hoping for the next one. And I don't know if Fritz or anybody wants to hop in on that. As far as I was reading that, I guess apparently it's not as easy to implement something like this or straightforward. And so perhaps it's the implementation that has them hung up on how this exactly should work. I'm not sure. There was a couple of things though that did not make it this time around.
All right, 6 minutes in. And to your point, Alyssa, since C# is so mature, you have to be very careful what you do. Like the optimizations are critical. So we're not breaking stuff.
Yeah.
It's not really.
Yeah. So we talked, you can do green checks. There's not a what? Sorry.
Undo for these features. You add a feature, you can't really, you can't go in C# 11 and say, yeah, we really should add that thing in C# 10. I think that's one of the reasons why they consider these things so, they scrutinize them so much.
All right, I'm going to take control back one last time here, okay? And share my screen. Okay, so C# 10 is here, folks. Use it at will to make your code a little bit more expressive, a little bit more performant, however you want to use it. Let's talk migration, modernization. And I think there was one last poll left, or maybe it's at the end. Let's talk about this first, okay? This is the thing that a lot of you are asking, and we are asking, like, what makes sense with all the things, right? So let's kind of talk through some of the options, right? And keep in mind, these are all options. There is no right or wrong. It all depends on where's your team at. What else are you doing, right? So if you're doing .NET Framework, everybody on the .NET team likes to tell you that you should come on to the latest and greatest bits, but you're fine if you just want to stay on .NET Framework. If you're not looking for those extra APIs or features, you're fine. Your .NET Framework apps are fine. If you are doing, I kind of broke this down into desktop and web. So let's talk about desktop first. if you are doing WPF or WinForms, right, there is this thing called the .NET Upgrade Assistant, which I urge you to take a look at. This is really, really good. It transforms your projects into an SDK-style project. It makes your app runtimes kind of transformed into .NET 6. So it's really, really good. Take a look at that. And that's the same assistant you're going to use coming from Xamarin Forms going into .NET MAUI. That's going to be a much, much simpler thing. But modern WPF WinForms run on .NET 6. If you are starting up from scratch, WinUI 3, that's your full and the latest Windows UI stack. That's only Windows, though. If you do want to go cross-platform, .NET MAUI is your solution for going Windows, Mac, iOS, or Android. And then if you're doing Blazor, then you got hybrid apps to bring in that web goodness into .NET MAUI and other things that kind of power it up. And one last quick thing here, because my little VM is getting to be a little infamous, looks like. So I have this booted up. So here's a straight up WPF app, right? Nothing going on here. You'll see the little hot reload thing, so that works the same way. So the only thing I have done here is I've brought in this web view component, right? And here's my main window XAML. And all I'm doing here is just plopping in that Blazor web view. This is not a .NET MAUI app. This is a straight up WPF app. And I can point this web view source to whichever URL I want on the internet. Or I can say my Blazor code lives in the same project as my WPF app. So here's my counter.razor, which is like this Blazor component here. But if I strip away all the styling, here's the app running, right? This is a WPF app. Started from framework, I use the .NET Upgrade Assistant. And this is a counter. This is a Blazor counter. And if I take away all the styling, you can't tell that that's a web component, right? So that is the point. Do what makes sense for your apps. So going back here, I want to post a question here to Jeff here. What are your thoughts for desktop apps?
So honestly, I am a longtime WinForms developer. That is where I'm comfortable, where I like building things, where I've built a couple of WinForms apps with .NET 5. .NET MAUI looks really slick for me as a Blazor developer, and I want to try it out. I want to get in there and I want to love it, because as a web developer, I feel like I'm going to be really comfortable there. So until .NET MAUI goes,
so highly productive. I know you can agree on that one, Jeff. With the Clip Talk app that you're writing and some of the other things that we've done, it's just so productive. You get so much done. And
I like that I'm not confined to Battleship Gray. Can we make that a CSS theme? Can we make Battleship Gray for Blazor for .NET MAUI? Is that a thing?
While we are talking about this, let's have all of you folks on the line do one last poll, okay? Because like we're talking about the same things that you are all dealing with. What are you coming from? Like you see .NET 6, it's LTS, right? You want to migrate, you want to modernize, but where are you coming from? What's your lift and shift? Are you coming from web forms? Silverlight, we said the S word, WinForms, WPF, or are you running ASP.NET Core, on framework or anywhere else? Jeff, go on to what you were saying.
So I think there might be a fun and interesting place to put together a CSS style sheet that gives you in Blazor. Yeah, it gives you a theme back to the WinForms Battleship Gray capabilities.
I would love that.
If nothing else,
someone on Twitch was telling me it exists, because I was like looking at some of like the old like desktop app UI, and I was like, oh my gosh, I need this. And they're like, I think somebody made a theme.
Yeah, I see a Bootstrap for Windows 95 theme.
Oh.
Yeah.
Look at that. It's kind of split.
Wow.
I'm glad to see not many people on Silverlight, but WinForms, WPF, web forms, it's all good. So kind of going back to our website of things here, if you have a web app that you are running that's web forms, you're fine. But again, if you want to update, then you got Blazor, you got ASP.NET MVC. If you have a lot of JavaScript, which is a lot of what .NET enterprises had to do, kind of go to a SPA, Angular, React view, you're fine. And now your Blazor code can talk to JavaScript through the interop. And then if you, again, I mean, your JavaScript is fine. Do JavaScript where you're comfortable. Let your backend be minimal APIs. Or if you want to start bringing in some Blazor into your front end, that's fine too. So you have options here.
I think folks need to understand .NET Framework ships as part of Windows, so it follows the Windows operating system lifecycle. We just had a Windows Server release a year or two ago, so Windows Server carries a 10-year support lifecycle. So Web Forms was originally released in February 2002, is going to continue to be supported until 2029. That is 27 years of support.
Yep.
And like, it's going to be around.
Yes. Okay, so like this is the reason why we talk fast, because there's just a lot to cover, and the questions have been hard to kind of keep on track of, but hopefully we have answered some of your questions. If we are answering on, or if you're asking on Twitter, hopefully we can leave a breadcrumb and get back to you. But anything, Ed and Alyssa, that you want to kind of highlight before we be mindful of people's times? Any questions that you wanted to ask, questions that you want to highlight? Are we good? I mean, there were a lot of questions.
I just want to thank that. Yeah, I just want to thank the chat. They were so amazing and great questions, great conversation, and we didn't have, I mean, we had like 950 people at one point and no trolls. So I think this is a first. This is a webinar first for me. So thank you for being so awesome.
I think I'll take one last stab at addressing Blazor Hybrid. So Blazor Hybrid is more of a stack than it is. It's a pattern more than it is a thing. So you could do Blazor Hybrid with MAUI. You could do it with WinUI 3. Anything that, well, not anything, but most things that can host the new WebView 2 component can do a Blazor Hybrid pattern. So I think all of those do not include Linux, by the way, and that has been a frequent question. Does Blazor Hybrid support Linux? So the answer there is no, not at this time. It does not. But to try to just clear that whole thing up, Blazor Hybrid is a pattern that uses WebView 2. It just so happens that we talk about it in the context of MAUI quite a bit because that's where it seems to be most powerful and you can reach the most platforms.
Well, if you're letting, oh, sorry, Jeff.
I was going to say WebView 2, to be clear, for folks who aren't familiar with that component, is an abstraction over your native web browser. So that would be Edge on Windows. That'll be Chrome on Android, Safari on iOS. I think it's also, is it also Safari on macOS?
Yes, it's actually called WK WebView. It's a Safari component on Mac. So you're getting the latest kind of web browser component. And to Ed's point, you come to .NET MAUI if you need all the platform integrations, all those APIs. Without that, if you just want to stick in a web view and do your web thing, go at it, right? So a lot of options here, and we want to be respectful of your time. These are our social handles, right? So if you want to keep the conversation going, please do. And we really, really appreciate your time. I know this was long, but there was just a lot to cover. And we are excited. I'm excited as a .NET developer. The future looks great. Jeff, we will let you have the last word. You're our guest of honor.
Just to wrap on the WebView 2, since all that component is a wrapper over your native browser, unlike Electron, where you're shipping Chromium bits, when you update your native browser on your operating system, the applications that use it are updated as well. So you don't end up with some rogue app that's been around and you haven't touched in 18 months that has an old version of Chromium and it's kind of stale out there. So productivity, you're getting improvements, you saw C# improvements as well. You're seeing performance improvements in all these things. You don't have to write as much code. The tooling is there that's going to make you successful. And when you start layering in additional productivity tools like those from Progress and Telerik tools, you're going to be nothing but successful.
All right. On that note, thank you so much, folks. We appreciate you and have a productive day and the rest of your week. All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Have a good one.